Caesar Augustus, Part 5 of the Lives of the 12 Caesars, by Gaius Suetonius Tranquillus. This is a LibriVox recording. All LibriVox recordings are in the public domain. For more information, or to volunteer, please visit LibriVox.org. Recording by Leni. The Lives of the 12 Caesars, by Gaius Suetonius Tranquillus, translated by Alexander Thompson and edited by T. Forster. Augustus Caesar, Part 5, paragraphs 70 to 89. A private entertainment which he gave, commonly called the Supper of the 12 Gods, and at which the guests were dressed in the habit of gods and goddesses, while he personated Apollo himself, afforded subject of much conversation, and was imputed to him not only by Antony in his letters, who likewise names all the parties concerned, but in the following well-known anonymous verses. Cum primum istorum conduxit mensa coragum, sexque deos vidit malia, sexque deas, impia dum foebi Caesar mendacia ludit, dum nova divorum coinat adulteria. Omnia se a terris tunc numina declinarunt, fugit et auratus Jupiter ipse tronos. When Malia late beheld in mingled train 12 mortals aid 12 deities in vain, Caesar assumed what was Apollo's due, and wine and lust inflamed the motley crew. At the foul sight the gods avert their eyes, and from his throne great Jove indignant flies. What rendered this supper more obnoxious to public censure was that it happened at a time when there was a great scarcity, and almost a famine, in the city. The day after, there was a cry current among the people, that the gods had eaten up all the corn, and that Caesar was indeed Apollo, but Apollo the tormentor, under which title that god was worshipped in some quarter of the city. He was likewise charged with being excessively fond of fine furniture and Corinthian vessels, as well as with being addicted to gaming. For, during the time of the proscription, the following line was written upon his statue: Pater argentarius ego Corinthiarius. My father was a silversmith, my dealings are in brass, because it was believed that he had put some persons upon the list of the proscribed, only to obtain the Corinthian vessels in their possession. And afterwards, in the Sicilian war, the following epigram was published: Postquam bis classe victus naves perdidit, aliquando ut vincat, ludit assidue aliam. Twice having lost a fleet in luckless fight, to win at last he games both day and night. With respect to the charge or imputation of loathsome impurity before mentioned, he very easily refuted it by the chastity of his life, at the very time when it was made, as well as ever afterwards. His conduct likewise gave the lie to that of luxurious extravagance in his furniture, when, upon the taking of Alexandria, he reserved for himself nothing of the royal treasures but a porcelain cup, and soon afterwards melted down all the vessels of gold, even such as were intended for common use. But his amorous propensities never left him, and, as he grew older, as is reported, he was in the habit of debauching young girls, who were procured for him from all quarters, even by his own wife. To the observations on his gaming he paid not the smallest regard, but played in public, but purely for his diversion, even when he was advanced in years, and not only in the month of December, but at other times, and upon all days, whether festivals or not. This evidently appears from a letter under his own hand, in which he says: I supped, my dear Tiberius, with the same company. We had, besides, Vinicius and Silvius the father. We gamed at supper like old fellows, both yesterday and to-day. And, as any one threw upon the tali aces or sixes, he put down for every talus a denarius, all which was gained by him who threw a Venus. In another letter he says: We had, my dear Tiberius, a pleasant time of it during the festival of Minerva, for we played every day, and kept the gaming board warm. Your brother uttered many exclamations at a desperate run of ill fortune, but recovering by degrees and unexpectedly, he in the end lost not much. I lost 20,000 sesterces for my part, but then I was profusely generous in my play, as I commonly am. For, had I insisted upon the stakes which I declined, or kept what I gave away, I should have won about 50,000. But this I like better, for it will raise my character for generosity to the skies. In a letter to his daughter he writes thus: "I have sent you 250 denarii, which I gave to every one of my guests, in case they were inclined at supper to divert themselves with the telai, or at the game of even or odd." In other matters it appears that he was moderate in his habits, and free from suspicion of any kind of vice. He lived at first near the Roman Forum, above the ring-maker's stairs, in a house which had once been occupied by Calvus the orator. He afterwards moved to the Palatine Hill, where he resided in a small house belonging to Hortensius, no way remarkable either for size or ornament, the piazzas being but small, the pillars of Alban stone, and the rooms without anything of marble or fine paving. He continued to use the same bedchamber both winter and summer during 40 years. For, though he was sensible that the city did not agree with his health in the winter, he nevertheless resided constantly in it during that season. If at any time he wished to be perfectly retired and secure from interruption, he shut himself up in an apartment at the top of his house, which he called his Syracuse or Technophuon, or he went to some villa belonging to his freedmen near the city. But when he was indisposed, he commonly took up his residence in the house of Maecenas. Of all the places of retirement from the city, he chiefly frequented those upon the sea-coast and the islands of Campania, or the towns nearest the city, such as Lanuvium, Praeneste, and Tibur, where he often used to sit for the administration of justice in the porticos of the Temple of Hercules. He had a particular aversion to large and sumptuous palaces, and some which had been raised at a vast expense by his granddaughter Julia he levelled to the ground. Those of his own, which were far from being spacious, he adorned, not so much with statues and pictures as with walks and groves, and things which were curious either for their antiquity or rarity, such as, at Caprae, the huge limbs of sea monsters and wild beasts, which some affect to call the bones of giants, and also the arms of ancient heroes. His frugality in the furniture of his house appears even at this day, from some beds and tables still remaining, most of which are scarcely elegant enough for a private family. It is reported that he never lay upon a bed, but such as was low and meanly furnished. He seldom wore any garment but what was made by the hands of his wife, sister, daughter, and granddaughters. His togas were neither scanty nor full, and the clavus was neither remarkably broad or narrow. His shoes were a little higher than common, to make him appear taller than he was. He had always clothes and shoes fit to appear in public, ready in his bedchamber for any sudden occasion. At his table, which was always plentiful and elegant, he constantly entertained company, but was very scrupulous in the choice of them, both as to rank and character. Valerius Messala informs us that he never admitted any freedman to his table, except Minas, when rewarded with the privilege of citizenship, for betraying Pompey's fleet. He writes himself that he invited to his table a person in whose villa he lodged, and who had formerly been employed by him as a spy. He often came late to table, and withdrew early, so that the company began supper before his arrival, and continued at table after his departure. His entertainments consisted of 3 entries, or at most of only 6. But if his fare was moderate, his courtesy was extreme. For those who were silent or talked in whispers, he encouraged to join in the general conversation, and introduced buffoons and stage players, or even low performers from the circus, and very often itinerant humorists, to enliven the company. Festivals and holidays he usually celebrated very expensively, but sometimes only with merriment. In the Saturnalia, or at any other time when the fancy took him, he distributed to his company clothes, gold, and silver, sometimes coins of all sorts, even of the ancient kings of Rome and of foreign nations. Sometimes nothing but towels, sponges, rakes, and tweezers, and